G'day folks, just another video on Atlantic Wall. I want to talk specifically about the Allied path to victory and how this happened and sort of a reflection on mistakes I made and, well, things I could have done, things I didn't do and so forth. So as I said, if you've seen the separate video, this is an Allied victory. And I think it's hard to avoid this result. I don't know. Okay, so let me go back to the very start. Your beach landings are kind of random and chaotic, and whether or not a beach fails largely comes down to rolling buckets and buckets of dice and hoping it all works out. If you really want to get a sense of how that feels and plays through, I did some live videos, a series of live videos of the full beach landing. So you can go back to those videos and watch that in full and see how that all played out. But there's certainly a feeling of randomness there. The Allies, particularly on Omaha Beach, need to create space for reinforcements to land. If they don't knock out any these German strong points on the map, it could be disastrous. In this particular playthrough, we opened a strong point. We destroyed a strong point, a series of strong points, opened a narrow space. I don't want to call it a gap because a gap in this game means something different. But they effectively opened space to land reinforcements, which were landing then at relatively full health. Once we open the beach and can move beyond that beachhead, the Germans defended too close to the front. This is a mistake I made at the Germans. It's one of the problems with monster games is you don't know these. It takes you 2 weeks of playing to realise the impact of your mistake. So the Germans defended right on the beach here. They defended in what is this, Formigny, and along the bocage here, thinking pen them in. And I think that was a critical mistake because the 1st Division and the 29th working closer together at relatively good strength eliminated, just wiped out a lot of those German defenders. And this gave them free space to rapidly advance along these roads. And as you go back to these early videos, I mean, the Americans had reached the L River up here very quickly. Bayeux took a bit longer to capture. The Germans held there, and that was pretty important. We decided to hold those Germans behind, which was really good in slowing down Allied reinforcements moving along these roads. If the Allies could have captured Bayeux very quickly, it would have been game over even earlier. So the Germans defended too close to the beaches, and I mean, we're so focused on almost sacrificing their units to slow them down, it was a mistake. I think they should have pulled back, just tried to survive, blocking main roads. If the Allies really want to go cross-country through the bocage, let them do it because it's much slower progress, and by that stage reinforcements would have arrived to help in this area. Further mistakes were made out around Caen, and that's pretty obvious given the losses the Germans suffered in this area. Several mistakes made. So the Americans were conscious of the benefits of clear terrain. Having played through some earlier smaller scenarios, I recognised the 2-column shift difference this makes as opposed to bocage. So the 6th Airborne held this foothold here, and they rushed troops over as soon as they could to hold a very small perimeter on this side of the bridge. You may recall at one stage they had to vacate this hex because of this threat from, I think it was the 21st Panzer Division. So they were threatened, but there was never this strong German offensive in this area. And I think the Germans should have attacked. They should have tried to force the Allies back because having that bridgehead here, I mean, this is super critical. Historically it was critical. In this game it was critical because whilst they were under threat, whilst it was only a small bridgehead, it turned into this massive offensive that drove through Caen, Troarn, and on to Eversey and so forth, and enabled them to reach this southern map edge. So the Germans should try to re-secure this eastern bank of the Orne River. And I think they need to throw some strong units at that and engage the 6th Airborne Division. Looking back, the 6th Airborne were pretty weak. early in the game. It feels like they're tough. There's a solid defensive line, but I think the Germans should have attacked there. Instead, what they did was just kind of held these units, and my mentality at the time was, well, I'll stop them moving through this open terrain. At the time it did, but the concentration of German units in this area came at the cost of spreading those German units out. The 21st Panzer Division should have driven to Bayeux. They should have done a lot more instead of just holding their ground. That first day, the 6th of June, the 7th of June, the 8th of June, that's when I think the Germans should have really launched a big counterattack, caught the Allies off guard. The Germans were hesitant and passive, and it gave up ground too easily. Once I lost those forces out around Utah, it was too late to send the 21st. I mean, they rushed out there, but it was too late to stop the Allies gaining so much ground. Clear terrain is just I can't state too much how important this is. Whenever the Allies saw clear terrain, they attacked and were unrelenting in their assaults. They would attack everywhere there was clear terrain. The 2 column shifts are huge. And the Germans need to basically not defending clear terrain is the message. I only realised late in this playthrough how kind of interesting wooded terrain is. So there's this wooded terrain in the middle here. The Germans can't use their bocage. And I kind of didn't really appreciate that. So the Allies were advancing more rapidly through this wooded terrain than they were through bocage, which is quite interesting. So there's this wooded area here, and this wooded area out here, the Cotentin Peninsula, was quite interesting. This whole area was quiet. 1st, 2nd, 29th divisions weren't widely engaged. The 101st Airborne's early capture of Carentan was critical. It was, I guess, almost accidental. If you go back to my live video, we focused the historical landings around this area. They drifted sort of across the Douve River and across the canal. I can't remember what this is. On either 3 sides of Carentan, basically. And in that position, they thought, well, we're here. They had this river crossing secured, but there's this isolated companies out here. And they decided to try to capture Carentan. They failed twice. I think they launched 2 failed attacks. Their 3rd attack caused a retreat, and the Germans failed their morale check. And these were strong German battalions, which were then forced to retreat. You may recall the Germans sent sort of reinforcements into this area to connect with Carentan, and they had 3 battalions around here. But just a series of unlucky die rolls lost them Carentan, and that it enabled Omaha Beach reinforcements to rush along this primary road anywhere they wanted to go, basically. And of course, they helped in this drive here. So this early capture basically accelerated the timeline. It meant that the Allies didn't have to fight through all this bocage here. It meant that the 1st, 2nd, 29th are all fresh and ready and can attack if they want. The other critical factor was this clear terrain here. It starts here, and once the Allies had broken into this clear terrain, there was no stopping them in their sweep around here. This drive on Cherbourg drew in a lot of these defences. It drew their artillery north, which then kind of left Valognes. They had to give up Magdeburg. It left Valognes a bit isolated. Ultimately, by this stage, the German lines, with Allied attacks, the German lines are so stretched thin that they just were struggling to form a solid line, basically, against these what became unrelenting Allied attacks. So the Allied strategy, once they kind of realised these lines were being stretched, the Allies were just attacking everywhere along the line. There was a lot of failed attacks. I talk about in some of the recent videos about how a lot of these Allied attacks fail, but they only really need the 1 or 2 attacks in key areas, 1 or 2 successes, in key areas, to force the Germans back, to create those gaps, to unravel the whole German position. And I think that's key to Allied strategy. They have so many reinforcements, so many fresh troops, so many replacements. Who's this? This is the 82nd. They're still down to 2 replacements. I don't think the 4th Division are down to 3 replacements. Who's this? This is the 90th, down to 3 replacements. They can just replace these troops if they're lost. The Germans are much more limited in their ability to do so. And so, yeah, the Allied strategy should just be to attack, 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 almost a war of attrition. What else? Yeah, attritional warfare along here, basically so many Allied troops is driving. Yeah, that's just, I think, some of the key reasons for Allied victory. I don't think, I'll talk more about this in my sort of broader review, but there's not a lot the Germans can do. They try to form a line, they shift forces around, they try to put reinforcements in the right places, they try to anticipate where the Americans are going to be, or where the Americans can, or the Allies, sorry, can strike. But largely that anticipation comes from here. The Commonwealth forces are largely static and grinding push, whereas the Americans were much more mobile and shifting left and right. And this is what I was talking about, anticipation. You may recall the Americans moved up some armoured forces here and then rapidly drove them along this road. This is the 4th Armoured, I think, not 4th Armoured, 2nd Armoured, to attack along this clear terrain around Cherbourg. So the Germans are kind of making some important decisions about where their reinforcements go. They're making decisions about their final protective fire or final defensive fire for their artillery. They're important decisions, but they're relatively small. They're static, whereas the Allied player is making really important decisions about what supplies to allocate, where to attack and how to attack, and in what strength and what support to bring in. Moving artillery and all these kind of things, it's far more interesting to play as the Allied player. But I'll talk more about that and the solitaire experience in a separate video in my review. As I said, this is just focusing on victory conditions. Hopefully that's conveyed a sense of why this battle has unfolded in this way, the way it did so rapidly, and in this particular game, in this particular playthrough, why the Allies have won. So again, folks, thanks for watching. I hope that's kind of giving you a sort of broad understanding of the progress of this campaign and why it's evolved in this way. Thanks again.